Hello, all, and welcome. We are back with another episode in our series, Coaching for Transformation, hosted by myself, Dario Minaya, and joined, of course, by Susan Minaya, COO and Chief Learning Strategist of Minaya Learning Global Solutions, whom is also an executive coach. In this episode, we dive into being an accountable leader. Stay tuned to learn more. Susan, we are back.
We are back, Dario.
We are back. And in true fashion, we're going to dive right in. So, when most people hear the word accountability, right, they think consequences, missed deadlines, performance issues, hard conversations. But you frame accountability quite differently.
Yeah, I do, because accountability isn't about punishment, it's about ownership. And accountability isn't instinctive. It's actually something that has to be practiced. And I've learned this in coaching many executive leaders that aren't really great with accountability, right? So there's actually a framework for accountability, and it's not complicated. It has to do with clear expectations, explicit commitments, defined decision rights, and following up on promise. So there's a formula for it. The mechanics aren't hard, but what's hard is the consistency of doing it. And when leaders practice those behaviors repeatedly, accountability becomes a norm, not the exception. And it's easy, right? It's like natural.
So, if the framework isn't complicated, right, why do so many teams struggle with it?
Because accountability really requires discomfort, right? Because we're not stating or doing the things we need to do, so we create this uncomfortable situation. In the 5 behaviors model, accountability is one of the most difficult team behaviors to master, not because people don't care, but because holding peers accountable introduces a lot of tension. And in low trust environments, when you have a team or your group, tension feels threatened. So people avoid it. They let things slide, they overcompensate, they try to backfill for you, and they talk around issues instead of addressing them directly.
So, accountability really, exposes the health of the culture.
That's true, Dario, exactly. If trust is low, accountability feels very personal. And if trust is strong, accountability feels professional. And that's a really big distinction.
Well, in true fashion, for most of our episodes, I'd love a real example. Where does this show up?
Well, I was coaching a senior leader recently who felt constantly frustrated with her team. She said, they don't take ownership, but when we unpack it, what we found was this. She was delegating tasks, but not defining outcomes. And this is really the biggest default for leaders when they don't get this right. She would say, can you handle this? But she wasn't clarifying. What does done look like? What standard are we measuring against done? And when do I want updates? And what decisions can you make independently versus when you need to come to me? So when results came back misaligned, she felt disappointed. And the team felt actually very blindsided.
So it wasn't really the lack of accountability. It was more just the lack of clarity.
That's just nailing it on the head, Dario, right there exactly. Accountability begins at the handoff. If expectations are vague, follow-up feels punitive to the person on the other end. If expectations are clear, follow-up feels fair, right? We agreed to this. We know. What she was missing wasn't authority, it was structure. That's a practice gap that didn't create a culture of accountability.
You also connect accountability to decision making.
Yeah, because leadership operationalizes through decisions. It's the most important thing that a leader can do well, but many leaders don't do well. So avoiding a decision is still a decision, right? So
Yeah.
it's like I choose not to do it. And often what looks like a team accountability issue is actually a leader avoiding clarity. So accountable leaders really take time to identify the problem, define decision criteria, consider the alternatives, and they decide which way do we need to go. And they communicate that to the people that they're delegating to or communicating to take it on, to be accountable for it. They monitor the impact of it. And if they need to, they'll pivot with them, right? But when they do things well, people will come to them when there's challenges and they can calibrate. So when outcomes aren't ideal, they own them. They don't deflect. They don't point fingers, no blaming external forces because I'm blaming the team because they didn't get it right. No, I didn't do a good job of setting expectations. So ownership really builds credibility.
In the past, we've talked about DISC, in early episodes. Does style affect accountability?
Well, absolutely, because every style has an accountability vulnerability, right? So this is one of the beautiful things I love about DISC, right? Because it's like, how are we going to handle this well? So the discipline is recognizing what is your bias based on your style. and compensating for it to commit to the accountability model. So that's practice leadership. You have to be mindful in the way that you're doing it based on your own personal style.
So, what role does optimism then play in accountability?
That's so true. Simply put, accountability without optimism just becomes, guess what? Criticism. Pointing fingers, you didn't do it right. And optimism without accountability becomes avoidance. So these two things are counterbalancing, right? Effective leaders hold both. They can say, this didn't meet the standard. That's holding other people accountable. And also, we can improve this. So that's optimism. We can learn from our mistakes. And that balance strengthens trust on the team.
So, Susan, if someone were listening and thinking, I need to strengthen my accountability as a leader, where do they start?
I would encourage you to start here. Where have I been unclear in my delegation? What decision am I postponing because it feels uncomfortable to me? Where am I expecting ownership without defining outcomes for people so they really understand what do I need from them? And accountability isn't about control, it's about credibility.
Mhm.
And credibility is built and it's practiced. So one clear expectation, one own decision, and one honest conversation at a time.
Great insight on a topic that has honestly popped up in other coaching for transformation
Mhm.
episodes. What I take away is that being an accountable leader actually builds trust.
Yep. You see the common theme of trust throughout a lot of our conversations, right?
Mhm.
And trust drives performance, which is what everyone wants to see.
That's true.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, for your insights on being an accountable leader.
Well, thank you, Dario.
Of course. I think our listeners took away a lot from this conversation. I know I did. And in our next episode, we dive into being a developmental leader. Until next time.